This is Dylan with Geek Central, you guys, here to talk about the top 10 strongest curse techniques in Jujutsu Kaisen. Let's jump into it.
We're only going to have one honorable mention today. It's going to be Higuruma's curse technique, which essentially is just all about his domain expansion, Deadly Sentencing. So, Deadly Sentencing allows him to summon a Shikigami called Judge Man. And Judge Man can literally force Higuruma's enemies to participate in a trial. Wherein Higuruma can, basically prosecute them and confiscate their cursed energy, their cursed tool. He can even be granted a sword called the Executioner's Blade, which quite literally can kill any opponent in one hit. And from my understanding, it doesn't even have to be a fatal blow. He just has to cut you anywhere. So, that's pretty insane because, whenever he was about to cut Sukuna on his arm, Sukuna actually cut his own arm off just to avoid getting cut by the sword. So I think that, Higuruma can literally kill you if he cuts you anywhere. So pretty overpowered technique. These characters that are really hard to kill, Mahito, Sukuna, people like that, they could actually get killed by Higuruma. I definitely think this deserves a spot on the list. It's just going to be our only honorable mention today, so we're going to move on to number 10.
So, moving on to our number 10, Cursed Spirit Manipulation. This is the ability of Geto and later Kenjaku, and it's one of the most versatile abilities in the entire series. Honestly, like every ability in the show, this does have pros and cons. Before using the cursed spirits, you actually have to capture them, but for a user of this technique, it's honestly made pretty easy. Kenjaku was able to capture Mahito and even later on Tengen using cursed spirit manipulation, so I guess it's not too difficult to capture incredibly powerful cursed spirits for a user of this technique. And at that point, they basically can be used at the user's whim. So, Kenjaku showed just insane versatility and power with this, and I can't deny it a spot on the list just for that reason alone. And when I say Kenjaku, I mean Kenjaku and Geto, of course, you guys. But with this technique, Kenjaku could reflect attacks back at the attacker. He could fly. He could create a variety of shields and defenses. At one point, he actually summoned a special grade Asian divine curse spirit. And that curse spirit could actually remove any object in front of it. It was endowed with basically conceptual powers. He could restrain his opponents. He could summon curse spirits that would cause them to effectively fall in place. He can even summon an entire army of curse spirits, if a user of this technique really felt like doing so anyways. Geto was outright stated to have the power to not only defeat Yuta Okotsu, but to take over the entire world, barring Gojo himself, of course. Overall, the fact that you can summon an entire army, including godlike and conceptual curse spirits and entities, and just the sheer versatility of this technique places it at number 10 on our list today. And I just want to make a side note before we move on to our number 9. As with many of the abilities on this list, you could of course make an argument for a different placement, you guys. This is all just my opinion, okay? So, without further ado, moving on to our number 9. Number 9 is going to be Comedian. So, the best way I can put it, this is the ability to basically just warp reality by thinking of something funny. Kenjaku regarded the ability as a form of soul resonance, where basically his mind was just being taken in and forced to respond. Even Gojo or Sukuna, I feel like, would honestly be hard pressed to respond to such mind-bending power. Pretty much, if Takaba thinks it would be funny if your Hollow Purple did no damage to him at all, then that's literally what would happen. So yeah, it's a pretty baffling ability that honestly even Kenjaku himself was unsure of how to deal with, and if there's one thing we do know about Kenjaku, he has experience. He usually knows what he's doing on the battlefield. I'll give him lots of credit as far as that's concerned. So, without further ado, we're moving on to number 8. We've got the 10 Shadows technique. Some of you may be like, wow, this should be higher on the list. I'm going to be honest with you, that could be a fair argument, you guys. Especially after seeing the way Sukuna used this, it's definitely not unfair to say, like, this could or should be higher. I understand. Like I said, with the first ability on this list, you guys, a lot of these could be contentious for being higher on the list. They're all just really, like, kind of godly abilities. So, you know what I mean? It kind of just goes either way. So, the 10 Shadows is the ability to summon a series of 10 Shikigamis by quite literally using shadows as a medium for these Shikigamis. This gives the user the power to store objects within the shadows, and they may also like hide within and eject themselves from the shadows at any time for a surprise attack, which kind of gives them a form of like pseudo teleportation. But it also just makes them really stealthy and sneaky. Even Gojo kind of had a hard time reacting to some of Sukuna's surprise attacks utilizing this method of attack. Especially when he started combining it with piercing blood and stuff like that, but that's another story entirely. So, not to downplay Megumi here, you guys, honestly, because Megumi's awesome. We all love him. But Sukuna really kind of showed and highlighted some unbelievable abilities with 10 Shadows. He was able to use the abilities of the Shikigami without even summoning them. Like, for example, summoning the water from the Max Elephant like by striking the piercing blood pose, like I was just talking about, basically, and also showing that Sukuna's capacity for copying techniques just straight up translates to any form he's in. So these summons, they differ in power pretty greatly, with the strongest of these shadows, the Divine General Maharaga, being capable of defeating like 98% of the JJK verse, probably. I mean, when he's utilized correctly, as the King of Curses so generously proved to us. And that's just one of the 10 Shadow Shikigami, you guys. This ability could probably be higher on the list, like I said, just on the basis of the fact that it can summon Maharaga, and seeing the way that Sukuna used it. I mean, yeah, like I said earlier, you could probably make an argument for this to be higher. I think it all just comes down to who is utilizing it, because to actually use Maharaga and actually call him your Shikigami, you have to be able to defeat him, and that's something that Megumi has still not accomplished. So I just want to make a random side note about the 10 Shadows, you guys. What exactly are the limits of the 10 Shadow users' ability to use their own Shikigami's abilities? I'm just honestly curious. I kind of hope we get to see more about that. Because, like, what if Megumi or another 10 Shadow user could utilize a combination of like Roundier's healing and stack it on top of his own RCT to like heal even faster? Sukuna kind of showed us that this was a possibility, so I'm just saying it makes you wonder if there was even more that could be done with this ability had he not switched over to his real body shortly after the Gojo battle. So anyways, I will not blab all day. Moving on to our number 7, Construction. So, Construction is our number 7 ability today, and this is the ability to literally create anything, provided you have the cursed energy to do so. Yorozu was the most proficient user of this technique, and she was able to utilize liquid metal to attack in a manner that was almost kind of reminiscent of like Gaara from Naruto, and later on she also constructed armor, kind of like that of an insect from this liquid metal. It displays functions of various insects, such as flight, incredible speed, enhanced strength, which could basically be maintained just as long as the user continues to feed it cursed energy to control the liquid metal. But what really makes this ability crazy is the domain expansion. The domain expansion of this ability makes it to where any of Yorozu's constructions are guaranteed to hit her opponent. And the scariest part about that is that she can apply that never missing rule to her ultimate construction. It's a perfect sphere that has no contact area, so it basically generates infinite pressure. This allows it to crush matter with incredible ease, making it untouchable by normal means. So she can basically force you to get hit by a sphere of infinite pressure, and honestly very few would be able to clash their way out of Yorozu's construction powers. So I think she is definitely deserving of a spot on this list, in my opinion, you guys. Moving on to our number 6. This is going to be a trick answer, I think. It's going to be Kenjaku's curse technique. So, a lot of people just don't realize how this technique exactly functions, so it's more than just body swapping. It's basically a variation of the copy technique with kind of very bizarre pros and cons. For one thing, if someone godlike dies near you, you can become godlike by extension, as both Yuta Okatsu and Kenjaku have now essentially utilized the domain expansion of their respective bodies. Or I guess this can be assumed in Geto's case, as we never actually saw his domain expansion. So another cool side to this is that because Yuta is in Gojo's body right now, he should technically retain the Limitless technique, even if he gets moved back to his original body. So after this, in theory anyways, Yuta could grab a 6-eye from Gojo's corpse and potentially still have all of his own abilities, Kenjaku's technique, and all of Gojo's powers combined into one person. There are some really unique and interesting ways this ability can interact with other abilities, and when you consider that Kenjaku showed us, I believe it was 3 different curse techniques that he could use. He had the anti-gravity, yes, Kenjaku's actual curse technique, and Geto's curse technique. There's a reason he confidently was taking on Yuki, Chozo, and Tengen and just straight up emerged victorious, you know what I mean? This ability is a lot more broken than many people realize. So I will not go on and on about it. Moving on to our number 5. Number 5 is Star Rage. This is the ability of Yuki Tsukumo. So the reason that Yuki's attack potency is among like the highest in the entire series, with Kenjaku honestly stating that even curse spirits that were endowed with the conceptual power of gods could not contend with her strength. Star Rage is clearly yet another divine ability to add to the list, with its power literally defying godlike powers and being stated to defy godlike powers. So it gives her the power to add virtual mass to her physical attacks, and this actually includes her Shikigami, Garuda, whom she can actually extend this added mass to, as well as even utilize Garuda as both a Shikigami and a curse tool in combat. At multiple points she has picked up and thrown Garuda in a variety of shapes and forms, kicking Garuda and stuff like that, swinging her around, him around, whatever Garuda is, not really sure about the gender. So a single punch from Yuki not only went through an attempted block from Kenjaku, but it also tore through both of Kenjaku's arms that were attempting to block the attack. Just to put it in perspective, like how strong Star Rage is though, we need to examine the fact that there is stated to be literally no limit to the quantity of mass that Yuki can make and add to her attacks. This extends to the very utmost limit though, you guys, to the point that Yuki can even become a walking black hole, with the stated potential to wipe out every living being alongside the planet itself. And to make this feat even more meaningful, it was also stated that Yuki controlled the power of this black hole even as she breathed her last breath, and in doing so she ensured that the black hole only targeted Kenjaku with a little help from Tengen's domain. So, all this said, I think Star Rage definitely deserves a spot on this list, with Yuki's strength being capable of defying the gods themselves. Moving on to our number 4. Number 4 is Idol Transfiguration. So this is a pretty overpowered ability, and Mahito is just straight up crazy, honestly. So similar to Hakari's ability, Mahito does not need reverse curse technique because Idol Transfiguration honestly just allows him to reshape his soul and body at will. This includes damaged body parts, or even severed ones, or he can even rip off his own head and throw it at you. And unless you hit him in the soul, your attacks will simply be ineffective. He can mold his body into any shape for nearly any purpose, such as giving himself wings to fly, turning his arm into a gun, and firing a transfigured human as a bullet, making his feet into hoof-like things to increase his speed, or split his body into multiples, cloning himself. So he can also damage your soul with just a touch, making durability a little bit useless against him, and while he can damage you by merely touching you, you really can't damage him at all unless you damage his soul, like we said before. So This curse technique is honestly so powerful that even Kenjaku kind of coveted it. He had planned to utilize the technique to start the culling games, and upon gaining the technique, he immediately completed this goal. So we'll move on, but this is an overlooked ability that was only overcome because Yuji and Kenjaku are kind of like the paper to Mahito's rock, if you will, and many other characters would have no counter for this ability and would find themselves swiftly cornered by an incredibly versatile opponent that they can't even hurt, really. So, without further ado, moving on to our number 3 ability. Alright, we have reached our top 3, guys. Number 3 is Shrine. So Shrine is the official name of the technique of Sukuna, and his estranged relative that has transcended time itself, Yuji Itadori. So we'll start with Yuji's version because Yuji's version is different due to the time difference of the 2 users. Yuji's version, from what we have seen, requires that Yuji touch whatever person or object he desires to cut, and upon touching them, they will receive the markings that indicate where the cut will appear. Even Sukuna, someone who literally possesses a variation of this same ability, has not shown himself able to counter this ability yet, so it appears that just a single touch from Itadori can be deadly. This kind of further supports him being so high on my personal ranking list, and if you have not watched that video, you should definitely go and watch that and subscribe to my channel. And on another note, Sukuna even showed the ability to cut Mahito's soul. Sukuna's version is kind of the version we are most familiar with. This ability allows Sukuna to both cleave and dismantle his opponents. I know a lot of you are thinking this is just like a cutting attack, so why should it be this high on the list? But Sukuna has shown it to be very versatile with both attack and defense. A good example of this is like whenever he fought Jogo, he was able to cut through flames, lava, all kinds of projectiles, and utilize the technique just very effectively for attack and defense. But there's a little bit more to it than just that. So, when Sukuna uses the ultimate ability of this technique, Fuga, he is essentially opening a veritable oven of divine flames. So, I want to remind us all that before Sukuna whipped out his divine flames against Mahoraga, just his slashes, dismantle, and cleave, they were reducing an entire city to dust, essentially. So I just want to say that I don't think we should be underestimating the cuts and slashes, I guess, you guys. And keep in mind that eventually Sukuna proved that he had the ability to change the actual property of his cuts. And ultimately, this is what allowed him to overcome the next ability on our list. Moving on to number 2. So, the number 2 ability on our list, you guys, Limitless. Ever since Gojo learned how to properly regulate his neutral Limitless, Gojo has only ever been hit by Sukuna in a battle. Presumably because Sukuna has such a large quantity of cursed energy that his amplification can overwhelm Gojo's neutral Limitless. But, I mean, no other sorcerers or cursed spirits have ever even shown themselves capable of touching Gojo, unless he allows them to do so. That is just godlike. You cannot even touch him unless you are the devil himself. So in addition to that, during his battle with Sukuna, he honestly showed telekinesis on a level that was completely yet unseen for him. So overall, this ability is just completely busted for attack and defense. He can erase matter. He can basically repel matter, pull matter. He's completely untouchable unless you're basically a god like he is. I mean, what more needs to be said? Just the birth of this guy changed the balance of the entire world. Enough said. Moving on to our top number 1 most esteemed ability on the list today, guys. Our number 1 ability is Mimicry, or the copy technique. So, now that chapter 261 is here, I think the answer to this question is debatably shifting. Copy is not like the Limitless technique, though, in that for this to actually be the number 1, the user must be smart enough to combine multiple copied abilities. But in theory, Yuta Akatsu, or like any other user of this ability for that matter, could combine and use stupidly powerful abilities once he acquires them. I mean, just some hypothetical examples would be like Yuta copying Star Rage from Yuki, or using Kenjaku's curse technique to steal Sukuna's body after his eventual death, unless he kills everyone in the entire series. And, I mean, if he did that, he would be able to use Malevolent Shrine, because, as we see, despite him stealing Gojo's body, he's still able to use Gojo's abilities, all of his abilities, including his domain expansion. And in a weird way, I just want to make a side note here. It's almost like Sukuna's kind of fighting him on easy mode because Rika hasn't actually migrated over to his newly assumed form. So if Rika were to migrate with Yuta's soul over to Gojo's body, Sukuna could have to deal with all of Gojo's abilities in addition to all of what Rika has to offer. So, also, now that he's copied Kenjaku's technique, I mean, the bottom line is he can pretty much just beat anyone while using anyone's abilities, making Yuta Okatsu godlike on a truly different level than any other character. I can't think of any other character that has just so many options on how they can kill you, and he can literally just do anything, be anyone. I mean, it's just ridiculous, honestly. So again, I want to reiterate that this is probably the strongest curse technique that you can have, but it is kind of conditional, and the techniques must be collected first. Similar to the curse spirit manipulation, you don't just get them automatically. If used incorrectly, this could be lower on the list, you guys. So when Yuta did show his own personal domain expansion, though, it was incredibly powerful, and it included a ton of other copied abilities, and none of these were a joke. Some of these were like Cleave, a maximum output version of Jacob's Ladder, and now that we have seen him cheat death using his copy ability and combining it with Kenjaku's ability, I just really can't deny the fact that Yuta's abilities are deserving of this esteemed place as potentially the most powerful ability in Jujutsu Kaisen, you guys. Well, anyways, guys, thank you. Remember, this is all just my opinion, and it's all in good fun. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Geek Central out.